And now, Pulse, with your host, Dr. James Kelly.
Good morning and welcome to Pulse. This morning our topic is going to be the Kevin Guest House. We'll be talking a bit more, defining that. It probably sounds like a bit of an odd term, but it's a home in Buffalo that's designed for the families of patients, and in some instances the patients themselves who are under treatment in some of Buffalo's hospitals. Because of its location downtown in the so-called medical corridor of Buffalo, it serves primarily, based on geographic reasons, Buffalo General Hospital, Roswell Park, but it is open to many other patients. My guests this morning are Jen Ann Berger, who is the executive director of Kevin Guest House. She has been in that capacity for the past 6 years.
Right.
And also joining us is Beryl Zetkowski, who is the coordinator of volunteers for the Kevin Guest House and has been in that capacity for also going on 6 years, as I understand it. Welcome, welcome both of you to Pulse.
Thank you. Thank you.
I suppose it would be very interesting to our viewers to know the story of the Kevin Guest House. Again, that's a bit of an odd name. Who was Kevin, I guess, would be the first question.
Okay. Kevin was Kevin Garvey, a 13-year-old that came here to Buffalo with his parents from Sharon, Pennsylvania in 1972. He was diagnosed with leukemia. His family is a wonderful, wonderful family, and I'm very proud to be doing the work and representing them. Why we admire the Garveys so much is, I don't care how many children you have, they knew they were going to lose their son. While they stayed here, and they could afford to stay anywhere in Buffalo, they noticed that people were sleeping in their cars or on the floor next to their children at Roswell. They saw our house up for sale. They bought it. Hence Kevin Guest House. They named it after their son, and we're very proud of that, and every time we get to talk we think we know that Kevin is sitting on our shoulder, and when we greet people it's wonderful work that both Beryl and I do and the rest of us that work hard at that house.
That's wonderful. Now, I understand that the Kevin Guest House was the first of its type in the United States?
Yes, sir.
That's also quite a distinction.
Yes, and here in Buffalo, too,
yes.
On top of it. I'm sorry.
That's fine. But now I understand there's actually a network
Right.
of over 120 such guest houses across the United States.
Right. We, being the first, are very proud of that fact that we started this kind of work. With this industry that's growing, I tell people in Buffalo, we don't serve people from Buffalo. Our mission is to serve people that are out of town, that don't have a place to live. But what I would like to tell people in Buffalo is this. There are 120 of us. God forbid anything happens to you or your family from out of town. That the first thing you want to ask when you have to go to the hospital, if there is a hospital hospitality house associated with that hospital, if you receive the call at home and people are hysterical and they can't think, tell them that you call them back. Give Kevin Guest House a call. The number's 882-1818. We will tell you if there is a hospital hospitality house in that city. I'll call the executive director. We'll set up things for you. Because we don't want to see people in a hotel all by themselves. Because of the type of work that we do, we love them to death. And we take care of them. That's the kind of work we do. That's where you want to be, not all alone.
Sure.
And because when they get the call from the first one, they'll make a big fuss over you too.
What's the cost for your service?
We ask $12 a night per person. That's our lodging donation. But if someone cannot afford that, we accept what they can give us. But we do ask $12 a night.
Oh, that's wonderful. That doesn't sound like it actually covers your costs, though. Where does the rest of the money come from?
We're a typical not-for-profit. No, it doesn't cover our costs. We do a lot of fundraising. We take memorials, outright gifts, of course. People who have stayed with us many times send us money all the time. We have a newsletter that people send us money with. We have an exciting golf tournament that's coming up May 4th. We're going to be associated with the home show out at Spalding Lakes. That's a wonderful opportunity for us. And also we have an Affair of the Heart that's in September. That's our big fundraiser. And the reason You can probably see I wear a heart, and I also have my lapel pin on. Kevin was the original Home Alone. The Garveys were here when they were all little kids touring Niagara Falls. Unfortunately, they all got in the car and they left Kevin in the motel room. Mr. Garvey tells us that all of a sudden he looked around the table when they were out for breakfast, and he said, "Oh my God, we're missing one. Oh, it's Kevin. I'll go back and get him." So we went back to get him, and here's this little guy who's 3 years old, his nose pressed up against the glass, crying his eyes out, and said to his dad, "I almost had a heart attack." So all of the kids from then on called him Heart. So that's why anything in our house, everywhere, we have hearts.
Now, when did Kevin become ill? How old was he?
He was 12 years old. He lasted a year with the leukemia.
Oh, goodness. And he was treated at Roswell?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
How did the Garveys find the Kevin guest house?
The reason, why we admire them is the fact that they could stay anywhere. And they could. And Mr. Garvey then talked with, at then the Statler Hotel is where they were staying. And they talked to people that ran the hotel, and they just couldn't get the concept that, okay, we're going to be here for a length of time with our son, we'll be coming back and forth. Could you give us a break at the time in a package deal? And it just went right over their heads. So that's why he got to thinking. And Mrs. Garvey was sitting in the waiting room, waiting for her son to be taken care of, talking with other moms. And she noticed that those moms who could not stay in a hotel and couldn't afford to were sleeping in their cars. So they said, we've got to do something. And they did it. They bought Kevin Guest House, and it's just around the corner from Roswell, diagonally across about 90 steps from Buffalo General. So we're in a good location. When people come to us, they're so thrilled. They don't have to worry about a thing. We have parking. If they forget toiletries, if they don't have, if they forget their jammies, we've got those kind of things. We have robes, we have everything, because we faced it all. You're coming in the most stressful time of your life. Usually we serve people from little tiny towns, Olean, Jamestown, Yorkshire Corners. They don't like to come to Buffalo. If they've got to come to Buffalo, oh my God, they're seeing murder and mayhem. So they're going to come, we open up our front door, we care for them. They don't have to think of another thing but getting well or getting the patient well. And we're very proud of that.
And meals and all of that are...
We don't cook for our guests. There is a kitchen for them to use, and we do have some pictures of the inside of our house, because I'm sure that your listeners would like to see what a hospital hospitality house looks like. We do have a beautiful old Victorian home. It's an old Victorian kitchen. They can bring groceries with them, or I also brought Beryl along with me that can talk about what our volunteers do for our guests. They can bring groceries. We tell them to do that. We have a packet that we mail out ahead of time so that they know what to expect. Plus, one night a week, we have two wonderful ladies that cook dinner for our guests, and they come in and there can be a meal for them. We have found that people don't want to leave the hospital. I thought I could have 5-course meals and have churches come in. It just doesn't work. So what we do is we have Easy Meal that they can come in and just grab it and heat it up in the microwave and sit down at 7:30 at night or 8 o'clock. That's what works at our house. We do like to have church groups, though, come in during the holidays and at least at Christmas, that we can give some caring to our families.
That's wonderful. How many families or people can you accommodate? How many rooms are there?
In the main house, we have a complex of houses. In the main house, we serve 15 people. We have 6 bedrooms. We do have to do some shared housing. We wish we could give everybody their own bedroom, their own bathroom. Our house isn't built that way. But they will find that all of our houses are clean and bright and wonderful. You don't have to worry about a thing. Bed is made for you. Towels and washcloths are provided. Our houses next door, which are 2 of them, we have bone marrow transplant apartments. And those have to be segregated from us, because if we would have a cold, we could give a bone marrow transplant person pneumonia and they would die.
Yes.
There's no question of that. So they live in a fully furnished apartment that are beautiful. We have volunteers that paint and paper, and it's really quite awesome. And our guests are just thrilled. They can't believe that that's what they're going to have for $12 a night.
Goodness. And
But
I understand we have some pictures of the bedrooms in the
Yes.
main house?
Yes, we do.
And also the apartments?
We just in the main house is what I
Okay.
brought with us.
So we will be, we'll be seeing those.
You'll be seeing those.
Wonderful. Now, you had mentioned the bone marrow patients, and as I understand it, that's how this program all got started. It was initially for bone marrow patients, but now it's really open to any patients who need to come to the Buffalo area from out of town. And again, we mentioned that you serve many hospitals, but unless it's at Roswell or Buffalo General, because they're in walking distance,
Right.
that the families would need to have their own transportation
Yes.
available.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. We don't have a van. We wish we did, and maybe someday we will, because that's a whole nother stress, trying to find us if they're at Millard Fillmore or if they're at Kenmore Mercy. Try to find us downtown is very scary. So that's why, unfortunately, we don't reach out fully into the community. Although we do serve people, trauma at ECMC. We have done that. And that's been a wonderful ministry, because we do feel as though it's part of a ministry that we do here. And so we've met wonderful people. They're no different than any of us. They're struggling with an illness, trying to get through it, and we're there to help them to do it.
I can imagine. Well, Beryl, unfortunately, we've sort of shortchanged you here a little bit, and we're coming up on the break. So we'll take a break right now, and we'll be rejoined in another few minutes with Beryl Zatkowski and also with Jan Ann Berger of the Kevin Guest House. Please stay tuned. Thank you. Our topic this morning is the Kevin Guest House here in Buffalo, New York. It is the first such guest house for the families of ill patients visiting the Buffalo area. It's been in existence since 1972. My guests are the executive director, Jan Ann Berger, and Beryl Zatkowski, who is one of the volunteers. Beryl, I was mentioning we had so many things to talk about here. We haven't gotten to the volunteers yet, so let me please start the second segment with you. You've been a volunteer for, I see on your pin it says 5 years, but you're actually going on 6. Just turned 6. Okay, we'll have to get you a new pin. How many volunteers are there? And we'll just start with that.
At the moment, we have about 26, 27, and that fluctuates. You know, they come and go. Some have been with us a long time. Some don't stay too long because of reasons, family reasons, or they get a job or something like that. So. And we have some volunteers that like to work nights, and some that work the day shift. So.
And what do the volunteers do at the guest house?
Well, that's what's nice about working at Kevin Guest House. We have an executive director who lets us find our own niche and encourages to do what we do best. And as she said, we have 2 ladies who love to cook. And they come in on a Wednesday and they do their thing and cook the meal for the guests at night, which is just wonderful. And then we have a lady who just loves to paper and decorate, and she'll do anything. She loves it, absolutely loves it. And then we have volunteers that man the desk. We have volunteers that just do special events for us. They don't come into the house weekly. And then we have volunteers that come in and make beds and vacuum and do anything we ask. So.
It sounds like there's an awful lot of work. Obviously, as Jan Ann was telling us, with all of those things taken care of for people, with the bedding and the linens being changed, obviously there's a lot of work. And so it's all the volunteers who do that. Is there a paid staff in addition to the volunteers, or is it pretty much all volunteer, with the exception of the director?
No, there's paid staff. We have Jan Ann, and then she has an executive secretary, and that comes in 3 days a week for her to work. And then we have a gentleman that does cleaning and minor repairs and so forth. And then we have a young woman that comes in and does a lot of the heavier cleaning.
Now, how did you find out about the guest house? How did you get involved in this 6 years ago?
Well, I had just lost a son
Oh, I'm sorry.
and was feeling a little disconnected. And Jen Ann, once in a while, runs the guest house in the volunteer column on Thursdays in Buffalo Evening News. And I read it, and I cut it out. I knew I needed to do something. And cut it out, put it on the refrigerator, and just kept looking at it and thinking, one of these days I will call that place, and procrastinated for about a month. And then one day I just said, I'm going to do this. And called up, and she asked me if I'd come in to interview. And I said yes, and I went in the next day, and I walked in that door, and there's such a sense of peace in that house, and it's a really special place. And I started work next day.
And what is your niche, before we just get off there?
Well, I used to do everything. I'm jack of all trades, master of none. And but now I do quite a bit of my work at home, as well as coming in Thursdays. My day is Thursday, and I come in and I do whatever's needed to be done. I make beds, I clean, I sometimes just man the desk. It's whatever's needed at the house.
But it sounds like it's very fulfilling.
It is. It's food for the soul, and I've gotten more out of the house than the house gets out of me. No doubt about it.
That's wonderful.
We have a little story to tell you. There were never any volunteers at this house before I came, and I knew in my heart that we could certainly get volunteers in Buffalo. So I run the ad, and Beryl comes to the front door. She's the first person, so of course I'm nervous, and I've got to get this woman. So she comes in, we sit down and talk and do the tour, the whole thing, and she takes the application home with her. I thought, this is it. Now what did I did something wrong. Oh my God, I'll never see this woman again. So I was sitting on pins and needles, and then she called and said, I'm coming tomorrow. And it was the best thing that's ever happened for this house. We are blessed to have Beryl. Believe me. She coordinates the volunteers. They love her. They'll do anything. She calls them up and says, you're going to do this, and they do it. So we have them frightened too.
Goodness. I realize this may be a seasonal, well, maybe not seasonal, but you can never predict, but how busy is there, or how full is the house usually?
To give you some background on that, and we have some problems sometimes with our board understanding that. We have 6 bedrooms. We sleep 15 people. So 2 of our bedrooms, we house 4 people in them. Now, we use them this way. Either it will be loaded with men that are here because their wives are sick. So that's what we call a single man. Or we will have 4 single women whose husbands are ill. Then we may not have that combination at all. We might need a room for a couple. So we will put a couple in that room. Well, we will not put 4 people that don't know each other and 2 couples in. So we lose 2 beds. But we're there to serve people, and we work it however we need to work it. I don't know what our guests do or how they live when they're not with us. But when they are with us, they'll do anything to help each other. If they need to up and move, they'll move. It's amazing. The conversations, just like your own family in your home, around that kitchen table, it affirms me every single day for the work that I have to do to go out and beg, borrow, and steal to keep the place going. I don't have to do that as much as I used to because people are understanding who we are now and what our concept is. And everybody is touched by illness, unfortunately. You being a doctor, you know that.
Yes.
So we're pleased that we can be there and to see what happens with people, and hopefully they'll go home and remember that. And many times they do. It spreads out through their churches, through their organizations that they belong to, and they know that they've been well taken care of. People aren't getting that anymore. We talk about that at the National Association when we have our conference. It's such a simple thing to say, how are you doing? What's happening with your husband? How's your son? What can we do for you? It's drunk in like a sponge. It's amazing. And people just, well, you would do that? You mean a volunteer would do grocery shopping for us? Sure. Sure we will.
Wonderful. I think one of the points that you brought up and touched upon is worth reminding our viewers of, and that is that you are not for profit. That you do, that fundraising, keeping the doors open is difficult. Certainly it's important. I think we can appreciate that. I would guess, and I have to admit that myself until several weeks ago, despite the fact that I'm in the medical field and I practice just down the street, was not aware of the existence of the Kevin Guest House. I tend to think of Ronald McDonald House. I work at Children's Hospital, and I certainly know the work that they do, but they, of course, are endowed by McDonald's. I understand that there is Hope Lodge in Buffalo, which is funded by the American Cancer Society.
That's right.
But again, in deference, the Kevin Guest House is freestanding, and at only $12 a night, you have a lot of other costs to cover.
Yes.
You had touched on fundraising and some of the things that are coming up, and Beryl, I would imagine that the volunteers also get pretty involved in,
Yes, they
in
do.
fundraising. What sorts of things? I mean, it's great to have a volunteer staff. Obviously, it helps with the cost somewhat, but I'm sure there's a lot of work to do in terms of drumming up other support, both in terms of person power, I won't say manpower,
Very good.
but also in terms of dollars, of finances. What do the volunteers do as far as fundraising goes?
The volunteers actually don't do any fundraising.
Okay.
That's left to the board and Jen Ann. And Jen Ann goes out on speaking engagements, and she just talks to anybody who'll listen, actually, about money. And so we don't put no input in that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
they don't
Yeah.
raise the money.
No.
But they work the events.
Right.
I guess that's what I
Yes.
wanted to
Okay,
get at.
that's
Right.
what-
Yes.
Right. But that's also nice, because it's not like if someone is interested in volunteering
Oh,
and they call, they don't have to worry that they're going to be sent out on the street to collect alms or something.
No,
I mean,
no,
you really
not
do
at
work
all.
with the patients and their
Right.
families.
Right.
Now, Jen Ann, you had mentioned, and we were talking a little bit before the break about the changing face of healthcare. Certainly that's changing the way many physicians, such as myself, practice medicine, and the way many patients receive healthcare in terms of things that they used to stay in the hospital for a few days or even overnight for, are now being done on an outpatient basis. We've talked about the guest houses providing services for the families, but now there may be instances where a patient, now I'll mention bone marrow transplant for an instance, but some of that's being done outpatient, and the patient themselves could stay at the guest house.
That's the look of the future. A bone marrow transplant being done outpatient. So that is going to put a whole new look on what we're doing, too. We're going to get that person from the very, very, very beginning. We're just not going to have the family until they come out of that isolation and then over to one of our apartments. So what happens now is the family stays with us while the bone marrow transplant is being done at Roswell. Then the bone marrow patient comes out, we move them to one of the complexes. And that's where they live up to 90 days. It depends upon the patient. What we're seeing a difference is we're getting the angioplasty, the open heart surgery coming in now the night before, ready to go into the hospital. We encourage that. Don't drive 300 miles or whatever and be stressed trying to find us to begin with.
Yes.
All stressed out to be operated on. Come and stay the night before with us. Then now we get a lot of people that have more meds, have to have visiting nurses because ports have to be cleaned out and so forth. So our whole association is looking at managed care and how it's going to affect hospitality houses.
Unfortunately, we have to finish here. This has been fascinating, and thank you both for joining us very much. The Kevin Guest House down just around the corner from Roswell and from Buffalo General. Jen Ann Berger, Beryl Zetkowski. Please contact them if you're interested in volunteering, or certainly if you have other resources that you can donate in addition to your time. Thank you for joining us on Pulse.